From the heart of conversations that matter, this is Those Who Give a Damn, a podcast where passion meets purpose and conversation sparks action. I am your host, Dr. Duvalier Malone, and today we're talking about something every DC citizen should be feeling one way or another. We're going to talk about safety, accountability, leadership, and the future of the city. Too often, these conversations about public safety get reduced to slogans. Some people even say we need to be tougher. Others say we need more services. But the truth is, DC citizens deserve more than politics, more than talking points. And so today, we have someone that's going to get right to it. So I have Greg Jackson with me today. Greg, welcome to Those Who Give a Damn podcast. Super excited to have you here today. I love to start these podcasts off by talking to the guests about their lived experiences. We all have lived experiences that craft us to be the people that we are, the movements that we get involved in. So I want you to open up by telling people who you are and why you're in this movement for safety, accountability, and even viving to be the next city council at large here in the District of Columbia.
Yeah. I'm Greg Jackson here. I was born in Richmond, Virginia. Like so many other folks, moved to D.C. fresh out of college. I had family members that lived here and always looked up to this area, and so was excited to come to the big city and contribute where I can. Someone who was always about social change, and I've always seen politics as a way to get there and to improve things for our community. And so DC was also a natural fit for me professionally. When I got here, started by just volunteering with campaigns. I was on the Obama campaign. I wound up getting hired by their team. I moved up the ranks and eventually was leading the state of North Carolina and then ultimately serving in the DNC. And while I was in the DNC, that was when trauma and tragedy struck me personally. I was walking home in the Shaw community after work, or really after a late night event, and a fight broke out, and that fight exploded into gunfire, and a bullet hit me and hit two arteries. I'll never forget, coming to the hospital, and instead of being met with nurses and surgeons, I was met with investigators where I was interrogated about my role in the shooting. And I realized very quickly that I was seen as a suspect first and a person second. And the bullet that hit me actually hits two arteries. I had to go through 6 different surgeries and really 6 full months of recovery. So it was a really hard time. And I came out of that moment really committed to better serving the local community, but more importantly, figuring out how I can do more to prevent others from going through the trauma I experienced. When I was shot in 2013, over 500 people a year were being shot in DC. And so my story was very, very common, but also something that was very tragic. And so that's what led me into service and ultimately led me to fight on this issue.
Wow. Greg, I want to start with the big picture here. When you talk to DC residents, what are you hearing from them about safety, accountability, and the direction of the city?
Well, the biggest thing I've heard and seen here is that folks have lost hope that there's any solutions. And I heard that a lot when I first began an activist, and I almost believed them until I started to work with other cities, frankly, and seeing what was happening across the country. And I found places like Boston that were still suffering from poverty, from housing instability, still being impacted by gentrification and so many other challenges, but had gotten homicides below 50, whereas we were still in the 200-300s at the time. And so that really pushed me to dig deeper into what else is out there. And I started to meet and organize and build relationships across the country and found that there were a lot of evidence-based solutions that can prevent violence and reduce violence before we even deal with the big problems of poverty and culture and housing stability and even music and entertainment. Like there are ways we can prevent violence now. And so that was really, really inspiring. And so I went to work on Capitol Hill to push Capitol Hill to start investing in these strategies, to start moving policy in this direction. And after a few years, alongside hundreds of other activists, we were able to pass the first law on gun violence in 30 years, the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. And when that bill was passed, we were able to move $42 billion into different evidence-based strategies across the country. And we started to see numbers drop historically, including DC. And now we're in a season where I think that numbers are down, but what people don't understand is how we got here. And there's still a lot of confusion about how numbers are down and to the general public. But then there's a lot of neighborhoods that don't feel like it's down, right? They still feel the pain of losing someone 3 years ago, or being shot 10 years ago, like myself, or losing someone last week, like in Ward 7. And so in communities that are still most impacted, going from 50 homicides to 10 is still a tragedy, is still shattering for an entire community. And so I think we're still dealing with a lot of the anger and hopelessness that I experienced and met when I first became an activist.
Wow. One of the things that I've been asking a lot of the candidates that are running for office across the District of Columbia that's been coming on my podcast is issues that are affecting everyday people, people that sometimes get forgotten in DC. And so in Washington, a lot of times people see Capitol Hill, they see the White House, and they forget that you have Washingtonians who are living here, they're going to school here, they're raising their kids here, they're building a life here outside of the politics of the city. And so many of them are being forgotten about, and particularly in Ward 7 and 8. We've been talking a lot about food insecurity. We've been talking a lot about housing. We've been talking a lot about affordability. What a lot of Washingtonians don't feel like that debt is hitting their door. What about your leadership? What about your experience is going to be able to move the needle here in Washington where those people feel uh, they feel relief, if you would?
Yeah. DC has one of the wealthiest budgets per capita of any major city, but it doesn't feel like that because there are high concentrations of dollars in certain neighborhoods. And I live in Ward 8. I'm right off of Suitland Parkway on Stanton Road and Bruce Place. And it's a community where we're in a food desert. We're still struggling to have reliable transportation options. There's still potholes and overgrowth and vacant properties, as well as violence and crime that we know can stem up from those root causes of economic inopportunity and housing instability. And so I think what I'm able to bring a little bit differently is someone who understands and really has a pulse on how inequitable resources have been in the district, but also someone who knows how it can work effectively and how other cities are doing this very well. I've worked very closely with the city of Baltimore, for example, and Mayor Brandon Scott endorsed me because he knows that we've been aligned in our strategies to address underserved Black and Brown communities. But I've seen firsthand how they made that huge shift, right, to invest more in communities that have been overlooked and kind of change the philosophy of that city that's now making it a much safer and healthier place. And so I think with DC, I'm someone who can help us shift that philosophy and focus on pouring into communities and neighborhoods that have been forgotten about, and also recognizing that they can help build revenue too. They can help us increase our tax bases too. They can help make our city wealthier, and that neighborhoods like mine are just as valuable as others in the city. I think another major thing is that while we have a great deal of resources, we still are not taking advantage of all the federal resources that exist. And other cities that frankly don't have a federal government to lean on for tax bases are hungry and fighting and chasing federal and state resources. And we don't have a state to chase, but we have to do better at bringing down resources from the federal government beyond just taxes, but looking at grants and different partnerships. And that's something that I've done very well. I've been able to move $42 billion from my White House position. And I think that's something that's really, really valuable knowledge for city council to have on how can you really tap into the trillions of dollars that are just right here in the Department of Treasury, frankly, like right down the street, but
Absolutely.
DC has not taken advantage of. I think the last thing is I've worked in multiple agencies and I've seen how much the resources get caught up in bureaucracy, right? They can get caught into process and into middle management, into programs and certifications. And you got to go to this website and that website, and how that's become a real barrier for a lot of neighborhoods. And that's something I want to cut. I want to clean up and modernize so that folks, even if you don't have a law degree, you still can navigate the DC government website to apply for a grant. I just talked to a family who lost their 13-year-old to a shooting last week, and they're trying to figure out how to pay for the funeral. Well, guess what? There's the Crime Victims Fund that should be helping to pay for that. But all the different paperwork they have to go through is a huge barrier for a family that's grieving and in mourning, and maybe doesn't have as many resources, academically to navigate. So I'm a type of council member that understand those challenges and will work diligently to break that down and make things simpler and easier to access for all folks and not just those who are most knowledgeable.
Absolutely. I'm going to follow up on that. And I've been talking to a lot of guests and I've been holding them accountable
Yeah.
of some things that I really think are valuable and tangible right now. The University of the District of Columbia here in Washington, which is our public institution to and for the District of Columbia. Currently, right now, Greg, as you know, they are heavily involved in Ward 7 and 8 as it relates to poverty and food insecurity with the urban garden and sustainability and producing those produce and giving it back to the community. Can we count on you, if elected, that you would work so that UDC and causes will get more funding? Because practical things just like that can go so far in the district, right? We can talk about the big budgets, we can talk about all the funding and the money and the bureaucracy, but tangible right now results is a community urban garden with more resources with UDC students and giving that food back to our community can decrease poverty by metrics that we haven't seen, right? But it takes funding to do that. It takes resources to do that. I want to dive a little bit deeper into poverty because I,
Mhm.
I I teach students in workforce development, and many times those students they are hungry, they don't have gas to get to the campus, etc. What are some tangible things that we can do as leaders in the District of Columbia in partnership with the council to decrease poverty and see tangible results outside of the bureaucracy, right? I just gave an example of urban garden. What are you envisioning, if elected, that you will help to decrease poverty from that perspective, tangible, something immediately, right? That we can see some results in. And I've seen your campaign, right? So I can see you're deep in the community, right? And so sometimes it doesn't come from funding. Sometimes it comes from just community and community partnership. Can you talk to my viewers about that? Because a lot of people are looking for tangible results like immediately. How are you
Yeah.
going to be able to get that done?
Yeah, I mean, this is a perfect time, and you guys are getting a sneak peek of our affordability agenda. But that is a huge priority for our campaign of really breaking the cycle of poverty and figuring out how we can make this a district where all can afford to live. And one thing I will just say, if we were a state right now, we would be ranked 49th in America for affordability, right? Just ahead of Hawaii. And I don't mean no harm, but DC ain't as nice as Hawaii when it comes to our weather and the views, right? And so we are really in an affordability crisis. A couple really tangible things I would focus on. One is making sure we're dealing with the biggest burden, which what I've seen so far from talk to a lot of voters is the cost of living. Whether you're a teacher or someone who just moved into the district or someone who's been here your whole life, even our homeowners, right? The cost of living is strangling them. And so we have to think about how do we increase the housing supply? How do we create more affordable homes, not just to rent, but also to buy, especially for our families? Because I do think the cheapest home for a family is one that the family owns, right? If we keep chasing these lower rent rates, we're always going to be fighting a losing battle, in my opinion. But how do we get more people to buy and hopefully build some type of generational wealth for their families? But really focusing on the cost of living is priority number one. And priority number two is how do we make sure that we are dealing with the other major stressors like childcare and even rental assistance. Those are two major areas that I think we can improve on. We can provide government subsidies and supports to offset some of the expensive costs of childcare. We can make sure that some of our public facilities are better leveraged to rent out to childcare facilities, and we can build a better pipeline of childcare providers so that we can have more competition, which ultimately can land us in cheaper childcare options. Another major thing is, I'm sorry, I got my little list right here, is utilities. Frankly, right now, our utilities are crushing us. Mine are crushing me. I know it's hurting everybody, whether it's gas or electric. And so we have to think about how do we hold our utility companies accountable, but also how do we create more incentives that can offset those costs, whether that's solar, weatherizing your homes. What can we do to make just the overall burden of utilities lighter? The last thing I will just share is transportation. Whether you are on the metro, driving, taking a bus, we have to make transportation more reliable, more affordable. And living in Ward 8, we have to drive. A lot of us have to drive, right? And so we have to think about how do we make sure we are not suppressing or leaning in too heavily on our drivers that are in the district that are just trying to get to work and back. And so thinking about ways to ease congestion, but also to make sure things like parking tickets don't overwhelmingly impact folks who are just trying to make a living and have to use their vehicles to get to and fro in a healthy way. One other cool thing that I want to push for is increasing the earned income tax credit. That's something that has been a great tool for lower income families. And it's a way for, hey, if you're making X amount of dollars, we can increase the amount on your tax return, not for every person, but for people in certain bands. And I think that's an area where we can increase it, especially if we're looking at certain parts of the district, and hopefully help us generate more dollars for our folks to get by.
And Greg, let me ask you this because I was on the ANC here in Ward 5, and engagement is it's not where it needs to be across the district, right? For a political city like DC, you would think local government engagement would be phenomenal, but honestly, it's not like that. I tell people all the time I'm originally from Mississippi, and in Mississippi, before I moved here, the civic engagement right across the state was heavy, was heavy. People showed up at meetings and they were engaged. But across the district, we don't see that, right? People tend to go to work, they pay their taxes, they're connected to the city, but they're not from here, so they don't always take roots here, right? How do you get people engaged? I noticed your opening of your campaign. You had a lot of community people there, a lot of DC people there, a lot of young people there. What is the method to that engagement, right? Because a lot of people will see you and they will think, you carry this national profile, you worked at the White House, but at the opening of your campaign, those were boots on the ground local people in the community, right? Here in the District of Columbia. How do we continue to get people engaged, like the excitement that you have around your campaign?
Yeah, I think it's three things. I mean, first, we need to start electing people who are engaged in the community. And it's more than just your identity, right? It's more than just what high school you went to. It's how entrenched are individuals in their community every day. And it can be different. It can be their PTA. It can be a local bicycle club. It could be, a restaurant they frequent. But I think with DC, we've struggled with electing a lot of leaders that look the part or sound the part, but haven't actually looked into what are they a part of and how are they already connected to the community, especially as it continues to evolve and shift and change. So that's the first thing, is that we need leaders that are already naturally engaged. The second thing is, the reason so many people are excited to be a part of our campaign is because they are a part of our campaign. They're not an audience of it, right? They have opportunities to volunteer, to advise us on policy. We have over 64 people who've endorsed our campaign. Each of them are playing a role, whether it's developing different ideas, organizing events, helping us connect with more folks. But we are a community. We're not just an audience. And DC politics for too long has been very top heavy, very, this is my inner circle. And if you're not in, you're not in. And I really want to shift that on its head. I want to create a culture and really a community around not just my campaign, but my actual time in council, where folks feel a part of these different issues and then they're partnering with us as a council office, that they're partnering with government to accomplish what they want to do. And most importantly, they see us as a doorway in to resources, to leadership, and to change, and not just something I see on the news or on Instagram every once in a while. And I think the last thing that I think will help us shift the entire engagement is we have to care about engaging people, right? If you look at our government
Right.
entities, our websites are terrible, right? They're not engaging. Most of our agencies do not have a strong social media presence. And we have very small communications departments. We're doing very little marketing about anything that we have. And all of that, I think, harms the ability of us to serve. If people don't know or feel connected with what's going on, then they're never going to take advantage of it. And that's why we wind up with a surplus, underperforming organizations, highly funded agencies that can't solve very simple problems, right? When you look at the fact that only 33% of our eighth graders can read proficiently, or that we have the highest unemployment of any major city in the country, that's embarrassing considering how much money we have. And I don't think it's a resource problem or even a talent problem. I think it's an opportunity problem. And where we do have opportunities, we are not bringing it to the people. We are not investing in engagement, outreach, and marketing. And I think that has got to be a huge philosophy shift if we want to be successful. So those are the three things. We need to elect people who are already engaged. We have to empower our residents, our neighbors, and our citizens to be a part of government, not just a customer. And then third, we have to really invest and push all of government to engage the community and really make that a part of what we do, the same way we think about compliance and the different types of policies and check boxes you have to make when you apply for different resources. DC's really good at creating bureaucracy, red tape, and barriers. but we're doing a terrible job of engaging and doing outreach.
Absolutely. I'll give you an example. For 2 years, was teaching pathway scholars. They were high school students here in DC that were pathwaying into taking a healthcare pathway class. And they were taking a class through UDC, the University of the District of Columbia, right here in our backyard. A lot of them didn't even know UDC existed. They didn't know the offerings of the university. And to your point, it just surprised me so much, Craig, because in Mississippi, whether you go to Alcorn or Jackson State or Valley, you know that those are some options, right? They are
Yeah.
ingrained in the community. And so, to your point, there are so many resources, there are so many opportunities across the district, but they are all bound up in this red tape. Right, in this bureaucracy, and sometimes there are hidden secrets that you quite don't even know exist. And so I really like your vision there, and I want to see that move forward. The other question I want to ask you really quickly here is, what would you do differently than the current city councils at large? What would make you different from them?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a few things. I think one thing is my approach to working with the federal government. As someone who has worked in the mayor's office in the Wilson building and also worked in the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue, I saw firsthand how there is a huge canyon between these two buildings. And even though they're right across the street from each other, there's very little interaction. And when I was in the White House, I invited DC people to the White House, and it was pulling teeth to get staff and agencies and council even to collaborate and work with us. And that ultimately hurts us, no matter if it's a Democrat or Republican. If we don't have relationships with White House, we are sitting ducks for their federal interference overreach. And we also are not taking advantage of the trillions of dollars that are there. And so that's one major thing that I bring to the table is someone who can be a bridge between council and the White House and also council and Congress. I have now multiple members of Congress that are endorsing our campaign. And I think when we think about fighting for statehood, protecting home rule, protecting our budget, the way that we get there is not through pity, it's through power. And we build power by building coalition, building relationships, and not just depending on one member of Congress and a few shadow reps. No, we need to actually have real power as a council connected to Congress so that we can make sure our ideals, our vision, our budgets, our vision for the city, that we are building allies and they are fighting alongside us. So that's one huge thing. I think second is, as someone who is, I would argue, one of the largest public safety experts in the country, I have seen how we can reduce homicides. And I've watched us do this from the White House vantage point in 31 states where we helped pass different laws and bills and moved literally billions of dollars. And DC has still not figured it out. We are now less safe than Detroit, less safe than Baltimore, less safe than New York City, less safe than Atlanta, Georgia. And that is not because of resources. I think it's because of policy and leadership. And so I'm someone who can come in and bring the best of the best of ideas, of policies, and partnerships to help us get us on track to make this city as safe as humanly possible. We have places like Camden, New Jersey, that only had 17 homicides, right? They have a quarter of the budget that we have, right? And still major challenges with economic opportunity and housing and all these other things, but they are making violence almost non-existent. We can get there, especially in a city as great as DC. The last thing I will say is, I'm someone who has a true pulse and connection to the communities that have been most underserved. If elected, this will be the first time in history that there's been a Ward 8 resident sitting in an at-large seat. And that is a big, big deal because east of the river has been, drawing a short stick for so long and overlooked for so long. And the actual outcomes show that. And so this is a chance for the district to show a true commitment to east of the river, not just that we care about folks there, but that we entrust them to be a part of the process and to lead us into the next phase of this district. And that's a third major thing that I can bring to council.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's phenomenal. And, one of the wonderful things that I noticed in your campaign from the beginning was the boots on the ground, right? Like, I noticed that on, like, from day one. And I think that is so, so important. So, Greg, this podcast is called Those Who Give a Damn because I really believe that change happens when people care enough to act, right?
hmm
So, my final question is very simple, right? Why do you give a damn?
I love this city, but the reason I love DC so much, it's not the buildings or the lounges or the museums. It's not the like football team or basketball teams. What I love the most about DC are the people. And I think this is an extremely special place in the world where you can bring together fourth, fifth, sixth generation Washingtonians who have been deeply invested in a community, and they can be sitting right along someone who moved here from a Mississippi, right? Who's brilliant and invested in making the broader America a better place. And so I love that mixing pot that we have. And I also see how bad things can be when we get it wrong. I lost at this point 5 of my mentees to gun violence. And the one I was closest with, I mean, he was a honor roll student and someone who's trying to play football, who came to Capitol Hill to advocate, who hosted his own Stop the Violence rally in his neighborhood. And he was shot and killed on his front porch. And all I can think about is that potential that was lost. And every time we see our young folks lost, like the 12 and 13-year-old last week, or even the 5-year-old that's fighting for their life now after being shot yesterday, it breaks my heart because it's preventable. And I see how brilliant these young folks are and how much they can do to make this world a better place, starting with their own neighborhoods. And so I'm committed because I care about the people immensely. And I really believe that we have a special community that has had a special contribution to America and to, I think, Black America and the global diaspora, if you will. But we also are in a very tough spot. And it's because we've been under the thumb of the federal government and we've had some really strong leadership gaps that have led us to this tougher spot. And I know we deserve better. And that's why I'm so passionate and why I give the most damn about this district.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Greg. Greg, I just want to say thank you for joining me today and for having this conversation. And what I hope listeners really take from this episode is that public safety cannot be reduced to fear, punishment, or politics. And DC deserves a fuller conversation, right? That we need leaders who are going to hold people accountable, that are going to be boots on the ground, and that are going to have opportunity for all. We need leadership that's going to listen right before a crisis happens. And so, to everyone who's listening, this is your city, this is your community, this is your neighborhood, and your future. So, stay engaged, ask questions, and pay attention to who's offering the real solutions. And so, thank you again. This has been Those Who Give a Damn. And I'm your host, Dr. Duvalier Malone. Thank you so much for caring, and thank you for always showing up for your community. I appreciate it.
Thank you.